Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio with contributions by Elvin Freites is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.
If you're someone who's passionate about transforming education, which you are if you're listening to this podcast, you should check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The Charles Koch Foundation supports social entrepreneurs and organizations that are embracing innovation to build better solutions for today's learners. Visit ckf.org to learn more. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you again in another episode as we continue to interview the brightest and most influential minds in higher education. We just want to thank you again and again for coming back on this journey with us. We know so many of you who have written reviews for us, given us 5 stars on Apple podcasts. Those things matter and get the podcast out to more people. So we really appreciate when you do those things. We're counting down the days until the book is released, Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education. But I'm not going to go into too much detail today because I've got a great guest co-host back with me again. You know him by this sound. He's the guru of online learning, ladies and gentlemen. He's Dr. Bill Pepicello. Bill, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, Joe? Good to be with you again today. See if I can help you salvage this podcast.
Oh, I don't know about that, Bill. I'm surprised you salvaged yourself out of Norway. Yeah, I'm surprised you just didn't disappear into the great unknown.
Well, some of those fjords are pretty deep.
Yeah, so Bill was on a sabbatical, I suppose, for a month, just decided to go to Norway. But that's what happens when you were the president of an institution that at one time had over 500,000 students, Bill, because you had gray hairs and you just did it for so long. You said, I'm hanging it up, and you went to Norway.
Yeah, until you dragged me back into this stuff. So,
well, you know what? You never met a microphone you didn't like, Bill, but that's great because you have your own podcast, EdUp Insights with Dr. Bill Pepicello. And how's that going?
That's going great. We are into our 3rd season now and rapidly approaching around 50 episodes that are out there for people who want to look at it at EdUp Insights.
Oh, yeah.
You can hear Bill pontificate, as it were, on EdUp Insights and hear all about a little bit of inside, even more inside baseball than you hear on this podcast, because he goes really deep into some subjects that I think are at the heart of higher education and higher education change, and you get his opinion on things. One person that's going to give us her opinion today is my guest. I had to reschedule on her because I think I had a sick kid. So, we had to prioritize, but she's been so nice. And she's coming back. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. She's Maria Flynn. She's president and CEO of Jobs for the Future. Maria, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Well,
we're Bill.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Very excited because kind of like Jobs for the Future. It kind of says that this is an important topic, right? Just the name of the organization says this is an important topic. So why don't you level set for us, talk about Jobs for the Future. What do you guys do and how do you do it?
Great, yeah. So we have been Jobs for the Future for almost 40 years. We are all about driving equitable economic advancement for all. So we do that by working to transform the U.S. education and workforce systems. And the way we do our work is we focus on designing new models. We scale models that have strong evidence base. We work to influence, whether that's policymakers or corporate leaders, and we also invest. And so that is both through our investment arm called JFF Ventures, where we invest in mission-aligned startups. And we also do a good amount of re-granting to state and community partners as part of our initiatives. So we run initiatives on behalf of philanthropy, corporations, and government.
Can you give us an example of an initiative? Comes to mind so the audience goes, okay, what are you talking about here when you say initiatives? Give us an example of one. Sure. Recent, past, doesn't matter. It'll set the tone for how we move the podcast forward here.
Yeah, absolutely. So a new effort that we have is called the Center for Justice and Economic Advancement. And this is an effort that we launched last year with support of Blue Meridian Partners and other funders to really look at how to enhance the career trajectories and economic prosperity of individuals who have had have been impacted by the justice system. So both formerly incarcerated individuals or individuals with criminal records in general. So really working both on the supply side in terms of what education and training opportunities are there for these individuals, as well as on the demand side in terms of how to work with employers to embrace fair chance hiring policies.
Let me just kind of step back a minute, because when you talk about policy and influence and initiatives, has this changed over the last 40 years? Have you seen, how's the evolution of the initiative focus changed? Because, you look at higher ed, degree, and now it's non-degree, alternative pathway, credentialing, stackables. Does that flex how you move through your initiative priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there has been like a constant kind of evolution of priorities, both kind of at the federal and state policy level and within corporate America and within philanthropy over the past couple of decades. So before coming to JFF, I was with the US Department of Labor for the first half of my career. And I think some of the trends that we're seeing to continue to kind of expand are around like leadership coming out of the corporate sector, employers that are really taking on more of a role in training and advancing their workers. I think we're seeing a continued focus on racial equity and the importance of looking at historically underserved populations and communities, like in the course of our work. And as you mentioned, I think we're continuing to see increased like amount of attention coming to high quality alternatives to four-year degrees. So I think that I think all of these we're going to continue to see emerge, like even if we do, move into a period of recession. I think that those are three things that personally, I just don't think we're going to see like a turnaround from. I think those are going to continue to be key themes in the field.
Bill, over to you.
Oh, thanks. Well, I agree with you. I don't think a lot of that stuff is going to turn around. And while I wasn't in the Labor Department, I served on NASIKI for a number of years, which is the advisory committee to the Department of Ed. And I have been watching, although I'm not a member now, have been watching those trends. But as I look at what Jobs for the Future is doing, I mean, it's like a menu of everything I would want to do if I could have a wish list of things to impact the job market from education. So and this is for your edification, Joe, since I know that you don't have much time, you don't read much and don't retain that anyway. But you look at Jobs for the Future, creating opportunities, I think, is important. Strengthening the education and career navigation for people, ensuring program quality, integrating learning and work, building regional economies, which I think is very, very important today. And you're involved in all of the aspects of that, designing it, figuring out how to scale it, doing the political influence. I mean, it's the whole range of things that I think are essential for education to be helping the workforce move forward. And yes, there's a question in there.
You're going to get to it, right, Bill?
I am. One of my interests, having been with the University of Phoenix, of course, is adult students. Mm-hmm. And while some of that is falling by the way, at least at the university level, I see community colleges being really the driving force for that. Could you talk a little bit about your work with community colleges, since I think that's really at the heart of alternative pathways today?
Whew, that was a long one, Bill. That was a long question. Maria probably forgot about it.
Don't take it personally. It's just my job.
Okay, go ahead, Maria.
No, first I appreciate Bill. So those 5 priorities that Bill just mentioned, those are JFF strategic priority areas for the next, year or 2 moving forward, because we really feel that given the complexity of the learning to work ecosystem right now, it's really important that JFF be kind of focused on these issues of quality and navigation and regional economies, and the others that Bill mentioned. Also agree with the point that community colleges have a key role to play kind of in this equation at this moment, particularly around kind of reskilling and upskilling of adult learners. So JFF has been involved in a number of initiatives over the years, funded by the Gates Foundation, federal government, and others, really helping to make community colleges do a few things. Like, one, to focus on strong labor market connections. So how can we build solutions that really enable community colleges to keep up with the changing skill demands that they're seeing within their regional economies? And then the second is to help community colleges really determine how to best partner with some of the new models or the innovations that we're seeing coming into the market, whether they be driven by an entrepreneur who has a mission-aligned startup, or, for example, some work that we're doing with Google right now around the deployment and the scaling of the use of their IT support certificates. So in that instance, JFF is really serving as the intermediary between Google and the community colleges to help get this resource from Google into the hands of community colleges, and really helping them determine how best to embed these certificates in their IT pathways and other program offerings. So I think our overall position is that community colleges are a critical player, and that in order for them to continue to kind of meet the demand, we have to help them continue to innovate and transform along with everything else that's evolving and transforming within the regional economy.
Amazing.
One follow-up, and then I'll throw it back to you, Joe. And this one will be shorter, I promise.
Please.
In looking to connect education with the workforce, do you think that employer education programs are going to become players in the ecosystem?
Absolutely, I do. I think that we are, seeing a growth in that. I think a big player kind of in that growth is Guild Education out of Denver, which provides employers, a platform where they can provide tuition-free education to their employees. So I think Guild, and others in that space, whether it be, InStride or, others that are out there, really help get to scale. And I think, really leveraging the federal tax incentives, the 5250 credit, and for others, for example. I also think we're seeing an increase in employer action because employers in some communities are seeing that community colleges and other training providers in their area aren't keeping pace, right? So I think that, to my earlier point, if we don't help community colleges continue to innovate, I think we're going to see employers continue to kind of build workaround solutions. So, but I think it's terrific, and I think that compared to 10 or 20 years ago, we're seeing much higher levels of investment in frontline workers than we did previously. Previously we would see most corporate training dollars, vast majority going to support executive level, and I think we're starting to see those trends even out a bit.
Maria, and you taught, that's really important what you said, and I think I want to just kind of look at the broader context. It's great to have organizations like Guild, kind of the education broker, as it were, say, hey, company, we're going to pair you with educational institutions and be the middleman or woman, so to speak, to pair you up together. But there's so many learners, adult or otherwise, that aren't in that ecosystem. And one of the things that you talked about in one of the blogs you did recently, and I agree, is that there are so many different options for upskilling or reskilling or education or post-secondary education versus higher education? What do you call it? What's has value? What doesn't? Higher ed does have value or it doesn't have value. And this pathway of this non-credit credential does have value if it's non-credit bearing, or do you need it credit bearing? And there's just a lot of confusion. You know, you think about, how do you even take all of the options and put them into a context that somebody will understand? You know, it's like Google certificates. That's pretty, one thing Google has is this multi-trillion-dollar brand. And so they can put their name on it and you go, oh, I think that has value because I know Google and but then there are other brands that might have something of value that don't have that power of brand, and they've got to get into the game. So there's just so much for a learner to, I don't know, deduce from all of that. Right. What's your thoughts around that? Because, we are confused even just interviewing people on this podcast half the time, or at least Bill is.
Right.
Yeah. I'm confused by that question.
Yeah. I think there's a huge amount of confusion. Credential Engine issued a report a few years ago that said there's over 1 million different credentials that are available in the US. And
yeah, we interviewed Scott Cheney. He was our episode that just came out today, actually, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So he knows that very well, obviously. I think, like, as a nation, like, one of our biggest issues is that we don't have a comprehensive, like, equitable career and education navigation system. I think it is extremely difficult for, anyone, if you're a young person, if you're an adult looking to get reskilled, if you're a parent trying to help your child make good decisions, it is really hard to know where to go. My oldest daughter went through the college application process last year. And so it was, I think, even though I've been working on this for 30 years, I think I doubled down on my concern, having gone through the process as a consumer. The lack of transparency, the lack of really customer, like, friendly decision-making tools, really concerning. So one of the ways that JFF is working to deal with this is we acquired recently a small nonprofit called EQUOS, which stands for Education Quality Outcomes Standards. And we're going to be working with partners in the field and programs in our network to really work to embrace a set of quality standards for these shorter term credentials. Because I think if we as a field can start to kind of walk in unison around these things, it'll help on a couple levels. One, I think it would help move Congress to enacting legislation that would allow Pell Grants to be used for high quality short-term credentials. I think the quality question there has been a big holdup in that legislative process. I also think, it can be the foundation of a more equitable and transparent navigation system that I think would deeply help populations across the board.
Too many learners are being left behind by the current one-size-fits-all model of education. We here at EdUp and our friends at the Charles Koch Foundation see a better path forward. The Charles Koch Foundation supports innovators in education who are building and scaling new pathways to allow all learners to discover their potential. By changing the way we think about education, we can unlock opportunities for millions more Americans. To learn more about the Charles Koch Foundation support of individualized education, visit ckf.org. Yeah, it's interesting because Bill and I have talked a lot about this, and for now the last couple of years, we particularly had so many conversations around credentialing or stacking, or you know all the terms that go with it. Part of my argument has always been structure, and one thing higher ed has over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years is structure. And when people would say, would come on and say, well, this credential is a threat to higher ed, that's only if there's some structure around that credential where it could be, all numbers are relative, or all value has to be relative to each other. And that's what's, I think, has been the struggle. And then higher ed comes with this structure and kind of starts enveloping things slowly, like this behemoth, this sloth. It's truly, And then you see higher ed now partnering with different credentials to give them the quality standard, as it were. And I do quote unquote for, if somebody just goes, well, that's not true. No, I'm quoting. So there's this, I don't know, dichotomy between, how higher ed can be in this space to give it some legitimacy, or is this space legitimate on its own? And then you see, and this is a long question, Bill, before you comment. I was interviewing the founder of Grow with Google last week or week before. Hasn't come out yet. This is the second time we've interviewed her, but she said from the first time we interviewed her a couple of years ago to now, one of the fastest growing segments of people taking Google career certificates are those with a 4-year liberal arts degree, who are just coming back to get some kind of tactical credential because their degree is, arts and so on. And so she was saying that was unexpected. So anyway, is higher ed legitimizing the credentialing space, or does it operate? You think it has the merit to operate on its own?
Yeah, ideally, I like for it to be a bit of both. I do think that these kind of innovative partnerships are one thing that's really going to help us kind of get to the scale that I think we need. So part of that is, I guess, as you said, like the legitimizing of some of this by, some co-branding. And I saw Google's announcement a week or so ago about their expansion into the 4-year space in terms of these certificates, which I think is great. I think that, but I think there needs to be a bit of both. Like, I also think that it's important that kind of the short-term credential movement also have the ability to stand on its own, right? But I also, and then looking to see how best to create some of these partnerships. Like, I think Western Governors University, for example, is doing some interesting work, like really starting to blend together some of these options in terms of their degree programs and their shorter term offerings. So I think there's a lot that we can learn around what's being kind of piloted now and how to expand that, and at the end of the day, how to make it clear to students or prospective students, like, what's the best pathway for them.
You know what triggered this for me, Bill? Back to you in a sec. But when I came across this class, How to Podcast, it's basically Podcasting 101 by Dr. Bill Pepicello. And I was like,
What the heck is going on?
So that was what brought that question up. Bill, over to you.
First of all,
What the heck is going on?
that is not true. My publication will be How to Save Podcasts when the original podcaster is struggling.
What?
But what Joe was going on and on about was encapsulated in a phrase I saw on your website, Maria, and it really grabbed me. And the phrase is education stagnation, because I think that is part of the problem in higher ed. Places like Western Governors certainly are trying to address that. And there are certain trends that are coming back now, and I'd like to get your take on one of them, and that's competency-based education. We worked on that at University of Phoenix in the late 80s and in 1990s, perhaps before you were born, I know, Joe.
I thought you were going to say 1880s, Bill.
Well, that too. And we were reviled for it. And now suddenly it's reviving, and I think a lot of it has to do with credentialing, which is less concerned with checking boxes than it is with demonstrating skills.
Yep, I agree. I think that competency-based ed is, a trend worth watching. It's an issue that the JFF team works on with a few states and other kind of leading partners. There's a great organization out there called CBEN, which is the Competency-Based Education Network, which is worth kind of following, because I do think that at a time where people are really looking to see how can I get my next credential quickly, right? Like, they don't want to kind of step out of the labor market for a period of time to kind of get their education. They're looking for fast, high quality solutions. And I think a competency-based approach is a great way of looking at that, and I know, like, Capella University is a for-profit example of a university. I think that's really grounded in that. but we're seeing, a lot of progress being made within community college systems as well.
And in that regard, could you give us a little bit more insight, because all of this starts with access, and what sorts of initiatives do you have in that area?
Yeah, so we are doing quite a bit within kind of the high school space to really help develop stronger pathways between high school, post-secondary education, and career. One network that we have that's been around for 10 years, they're celebrating an anniversary this year, is the Pathways to Prosperity Network, which is all about kind of the redesign of, roughly the grades 11, 12, and then the first 2 years of college. So really looking at how to revamp those opportunities, bring in strong employer engagement, engage the community colleges in those efforts, and so on. But we also have, a pretty provocative new idea called the Big Blur, which really calls for a total reimagining of those grades. So almost, doing away with the system that exists and creating kind of a new system or entity that would focus solely on kind of those critical 4 years. And so that is an idea that we're starting to pilot in a couple of states, because we just really think that we need to fundamentally, reimagine kind of what is that pathway beyond high school for young people, and how to kind of move beyond that traditional mindset of, first you go to high school and then you go to a 4-year college and so forth, because we know that for the vast majority of Americans, that actually isn't the path that they take. And it's not the path that jobs really require.
I have and then I'll throw it back to you, Joe, because I know you're anxious to pontificate.
I'm always anxious.
I think this is an amazing point about restructuring what happens in high school. One of my mantras, and Joe's heard me say this, and he's read me having written it, is I believe that form follows function. And as the function of high school in those first 2 years has changed, I think we're going to have to see the form of that education, that part of the education system change. And that's exactly what you're talking about. I think that is just so important.
Yeah. We also had a survey come out recently that where we surveyed both Gen Z learners and workers and employers, and asked them about kind of their kind of interests in exploring options beyond the 4-year degree. And the report that we came out with is called Degrees of Risk, because the headline really was that at the end of the day, both the Gen Z population and the employers felt that some of these non-traditional options were too risky. So they generally were aware of what they were. There's apprenticeships and there's boot camps and there's, X, Y, and Z, but a feeling that, there was too much risk involved. So that was both in terms of young people feeling that if they went down that path, they may not get hired. And there was a, kind of feeling among the side of the employers, well, we know what we're getting with the 4-year degree. We don't quite know what skills we're getting with some of these other approaches. So I thought it was interesting because it shows that, there's a lot of alternatives out there, but we have to do a better job of talking about quality, talking about options, and some of those other things that we've already touched on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like your, boy, I'm going to lose it now. The Center for Workplace Learning and Apprenticeships. Did I get that right?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's right. Workplace apprenticeships have been around since when? Since blacksmiths, or
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Ben Franklin. Yep.
Yeah, so they've been around since Bill was in his prime. No, sorry, Bill had to do it. But they've been around for a really long time, and I think that's, you wonder how many. When we talk about the traditional student, the 18-year-old that goes to college, has no idea what they're going to do, goes to gen eds for a year, drops out. Because at 18, did any of us go, yes, at 18 I wanted to be get my degree in speech communication, which is what I got my degree in, which is basically a BS in BSing. By the way, it turned out to work out pretty well for me. But how many know what they're going to do, right? What if there was more apprenticeships? What if there was a work-based? What if a college created work-based learning apprenticeships before? What if there was a fifth year, but your first year was an apprenticeship so that you could figure out what you wanted to do? If you went to 3 or 4 different businesses over the year and, went to a business or you went to an electrician or you just think about what could be done in that context that to marry work-based learning and non-work-based learning. And there's a lot there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done, around internships, more, even formal work-based learning opportunities, looking at the co-op model like Drexel and Northeastern and others use, which are, does have that kind of 5-year model that you mentioned. Because I found just my own personal experience, like between the internships that I had during college and a part-time job I had at a law firm really helped me, among anything, like decide what I didn't want to do, right? So it helped me,
for sure,
rule out some of those ideas that I had at like 19 and 20. So I think it can really, and now I think with different tech platforms that make it possible to have, remote project-based learning, virtual internships, I think how we start to deploy these opportunities equitably and at scale, I think is like the next frontier, so to speak. Because I think, without having those experiences, it makes just the navigation process all that more challenging.
Bill,
over to you before I give Marie the final 2.
Okay. I want to go back for a minute to you're talking about your survey and people talking about the risk of various pathways. I'd be interested to get your take on how much of that risk is really protectionism. I mean, I see it, and having offered lots of certificates in my time, a lot of it was, well, no, that's not good for us. Well, it's not good for your business model.
Yeah. No, I think that's a big part of it. And on the employer side, what was really interesting was when we interviewed the C-suite folks, there was, a great deal of openness. But when you got down more to kind of the hiring managers or the HR departments, that openness really started to close up. So I do think it's protectionist, like you're asking me to do something I've never done before, that's not how we do things here. I think there's a lot of kind of mind shift and narrative change that has to happen both on the supply and the demand side. Like my daughter is now at a very traditional liberal arts university, and when we dropped her off and the dean was speaking and said, we know exactly what employers want, I was like, yeah, I'm not too sure that you do, but
you said that to the wrong person.
Yeah. So,
what did you do? Laugh or cry? Laugh because it was funny, or cry with disappointment? What did you do?
That's right. I think I laughed and said, oh boy, I really don't think that's true. But I think it just all points to how we're at just such a fundamental like transition moment, I feel, for higher ed, and that the winds, are really blowing in a new direction. And one is kind of really said at the beginning, like I just don't see us like turning back from. And so I think there are places where traditional higher ed is always going to have a role and is always going to be aspired to, but I think that as a nation we have to really start changing the way we talk and we think about other high quality options, and how do we help individuals like get the information that they need to make informed choices about their future.
So, Maria, we like to end our episodes with the same 2 questions to every guest. And number 1, what did not we, this is a professional podcaster here. What did we not cover about Jobs for the Future that you'd like to say? Anything coming up, events, anywhere you're going, speaking, blogs, anything at all that you want to plug to talk about your organization? And then number 2, what do you see as the future of higher ed? And let me get everybody tuned up. Let me wake up Bill.
Attention.
Okay, you could go now.
Great. Two things about JFF. One is that we have an annual conference every June called Horizons. And so I encourage everyone to attend. This year, June 2023, it'll be in New Orleans. June 2024 will be in Washington, D.C. And it's a great, really kind of big tent approach to the learning to work ecosystem, with leaders coming from kind of all different vantage points to gather around this topic of the future of education and work. The other is that we have a growing employer mobilization team. So we talked a bit about corporate learning programs, but we really believe at JFF that really changing corporate behavior, investments, corporate policies is really going to be a key lever in getting the results that we want to see as an organization. So I would just encourage folks to take a look at our impact employer framework and other pieces that group is putting out. And then the future of higher ed, like I often think about this in terms of my two daughters who are 9 years apart in age. As I said, I have one at a very traditional liberal arts college. My other daughter is in 4th grade, so she is 9 years old. And I often say that I think by the time my 9-year-old is 18, that we will be hopefully seeing a very different approach to what comes after high school and how we go about building those pathways, how we go about providing the information that's needed, how we go about like really embedding, work-based learning and career awareness kind of in those high school years. So that's my hope, is that this next decade really flips us over into, a new paradigm and a new way that we think about providing the education and skills that are needed to thrive in the economy of today and tomorrow.
Lots of good fodder in there for the EdUp Insights podcast. I think, Bill, there's a lot of concepts that Maria went over that I know you'd like to tackle.
Well, I intend to steal a lot of her material and put it in my podcasts. Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go, Maria. That's how we do it here at the EdUp Experience.
But I'll give you credit.
Yeah, we'll give you credit, but we'll steal all your ideas forever.
That's right. No, I have an upcoming episode where I'm talking about where people should go to take a peek at the central issues surrounding higher education today. And certainly I'm going to point to JFF and the good work that you're doing, because I think it's a great place for people to get a grasp of the essential areas of information going forward. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, Maria,
great to be here.
That concludes the broadcast for today. Of course, I want to thank my co-host first. What did I say once? I said he said
I was just great and terrific and the smartest guy you ever met.
Let's try again. No, I said, I think you got pep in your step and you like limoncello, maybe something like that. Anyway, he's Dr. Bill Pepicello. Bill, thanks for coming on again. Always appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Our guest today, of course, she's amazing. If you hear her, if she comes in to visit your college and you're a member of the institution, don't indicate that you know what employers want more than she does. That's a bad move. It's a bad recruiting move. Know who's in front of you. Ladies and gentlemen, she's Maria Flynn. She's president and CEO of Jobs for the Future. Maria, did you have a good EdUp experience today?
I had a great EdUp experience. So thank you for having me. It's great to talk with you both.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. The purpose of education is to help learners discover their aptitudes and interests, develop their skills, and then deploy that knowledge to benefit themselves and others. The Charles Koch Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization, works with leaders in education to remove barriers that stand in the way of all learners reaching their potential. They support individualized and flexible models that improve access and quality for millions of Americans. They also support apprenticeship and upskilling programs that connect learners to in-demand jobs that match their skills and interests. The foundation is looking for new partners to challenge the status quo and transform the post-secondary education system. Learn more about their partnership opportunities and apply for a grant at ckf.org. You can also find them on Twitter at C. Koch Foundation, and LinkedIn by searching Charles Koch Foundation.